Okay, I want to welcome everyone to the What's Going On People channel. This is being sponsored by the Circle Friends Task Force, our Project Soul. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that. We are having a panel discussion today. We are so glad to be with you again. And what I'm going to do is have each of our panelists introduce themselves before we go into why we are here. So I'm going to pass it on. I'm going to go according to an alphabet. So I'm going to turn it over to the C's. C. C to introduce themselves. The letter C.
All right. So my name is Carter. That's my last name, so that's the name I go by. But I'm actually originally from Greenville, North Carolina. I would say introduce myself. Look, that's too funny. We're recording too. I have a little humor with me, but I'm born and raised here in Greenville, North Carolina. I have several siblings. Went to school at East Carolina University. I went to school at South Central, then transferred to Pitt, then transferred to ECU. Graduated ECU 2017 with a degree in diversity and social justice and a minor in ethnic studies. I have done many speeches. I have wrote poems before, and I have done speaking events. And I do a lot of, conversation. I'm a co-host, co-founder of a podcast named Let's Clear the Tea. It's on Facebook. So yeah, that's a little bit about me and what I do.
So pass it on to the next letter in the alphabet.
I was hoping they were gonna say something.
Hey.
Oh man, it's funny.
M's.
Hey, my name is Esther. Esther Ross. They call me affectionately Queen Esther. I'm the executive director of a nonprofit organization that has been around for over 22 years, called the Circle Friends. I am an advocate, activist, and I'm just, grateful to have the opportunity to do a lot of stigma reduction work in North Carolina. And I'm going to pass it over to Latoya.
My name is Latoya. I am an advocate, an author, a poet, and I love inspiring other people to reach for their greatness. And I'm going to pass it over to Sister Karen.
My name is Karen Scruggs. I graduated from LCC with a associate degree in psychology. I graduated from Liberty University with my BS in psychology. And I am an advocate. I am an artist. And I am an uprising poet. And I just finished a sexual abuse awareness training, and I made 100 on my exam. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Karen. Now, there's only one person left.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tawanda Sanders, and like Carter, I was born and raised here in Greenville, North Carolina. So this is my home here. So for the past 15 years, I've been a housing advocate. I worked in the housing sector, helping people that are living in poverty, living with HIV, surviving with HIV, veterans. I've help all sorts of people with housing. I'm also an advocate. I'm a creator. I'm always a student, and I am so blessed to be here with Circle of Friends on tonight. Well, this afternoon, I should say.
So I want to take this opportunity to just welcome all our panelists. We are so grateful that you are here. Let's give a hand clap and a snap for everybody on this panel. It is an honor to be able to present today. And why we're coming to you guys is that we try to create a safe platform to discuss those areas and those things that impact HIV stigma. HIV stigma is still one of the greatest barriers for individuals once they are diagnosed to link to care or want to seek care, and also to access any kind of prevention measures to prevent future acquisition of HIV. So it is the number one barrier, especially among people of color. And because of people no longer die from HIV because we have new medications available. It's not like it was when it first came out that people did die, and some of them died a horrible death. But now we're moving into 40 years really researching this virus, and we have effective treatments available to protect that individual's immune system, and so that they can live as long as possible. But unfortunately, because of stigma, that stigma, a person would rather not go get treatment or go get the life-saving information that they need to protect their immune system. So unfortunately, we still have people die from HIV, and they don't have to. So this is our way of providing a safe platform to discuss external and internal stigma, so that impacts positive health outcomes. Because like I said, anyone that's on treatment, they can live as long as possible. I'm a long-term survivor. I was diagnosed in 93, and I just made my 63rd birthday. And I want to say that I'm like collard greens. They get better as they age. And so this is something that we all can accomplish and acquire with HIV. So we want to minimize stigmatizing language, because there is still stigmatizing language around. And part of the Circle Friends Soul Project, which stands for Spiritual Opportunities or Objectives Utilizing Leadership, part of our plan is to have spiritual leaders from any denomination to discuss and create openly ways to create safe environments for people of color, the LGBTQIA community, and also to receive spiritual support needed to combat stigma and work in efforts towards ending the HIV epidemic in North Carolina. Is many surveys that have been done, and what we found through doing community listening sessions and surveys is that a lot of individuals depend on spiritual or religious environments to help them through some things. But unfortunately, in the very support environment that they need, is such stigmatizing language that a person can fall through the cracks. And when we're talking about our community viral load, this person is not in care, and not in a system where they are talking about taking care of themselves. This person can potentially impact the community. It could be somebody you know, it could be a friend, a child, somebody you work with, and then this cycle continues to happen. So we're trying to address this on many different levels. So I'm so grateful that you are all here. And what we're gonna do is Carter is gonna be our navigator. And he's gonna navigate us through a host of questions that we hope that spiritual leaders will look at um and get comfortable with, so that they learn language that supports an individual instead of pushing them out where they're not engaged in taking care of themselves. Because if you're in a spiritual or religious program, love is the answer. Love is the glue, and we have to show that love. Don't just say you love me. I need you to show me. And we need to show it by being open, sharing our love with others. No matter what a person goes through, they can get through if they know somebody love and care for them. So I'm gonna turn it over to Carter, and he's gonna come and ask the panel, pose different questions to us so that we can have a discussion about the different the derogatory language that's going around in our spiritual and religious environments. So thank you, Carter, for taking us through this.
You're welcome. So we're going to open it up with a few questions about or centering around religious trauma. So I'm just give everyone the chance to tell me their definition of religious trauma. Then I'm going to give you guys the definition that's been used in professional settings. So whichever of the panelists would like to go first, what is religious trauma to you? Let's not all go at once now, ladies.
So sometimes I get more content when it comes to definitions. So for me, I wanted to, this was a new terminology for me. So I need to share that. This was a new word for me. And as I did my research, I've come across this where people will use religion in the setting to manipulate people and make them feel as if make it negative. For example, I remember being told that, well, you got HIV because you did some sin that was worse than anybody else's sin. And I remember leaving that place, and I went into drug addiction. I said these people don't care about me, and but thank God for God, and thank God for people loving me. I just celebrated 27 years clean from drugs and alcohol. But that some people will use religious trauma or manipulative practices to make make it negative and make you feel bad. And all that's doing is that you just trying to make someone, you trying to be more than what that person is. So I'm gonna stop there because this was a new term for me.
And
All right,
I also want to add that it's the weaponization of religion that really hurts people. And sometimes the leaders can use religion to control people, to have them conform. I think the most extreme would be a Jim Jones, or someone like that. So it's very dangerous to use religion in a negative and controlling way. So that's what when I think of religious trauma, that's what I think about. So
For me, it was like Esther, it was a new term. But when I think about it, I think about, how I hear some people say church hurt. And,
yeah.
For me, I go through a lot of health challenges and I get down about it. And I've had several people say, well, what about your faith? Well, my faith hasn't changed because I'm going through something. It just means I'm human and I have a right to feel how I feel. It has nothing to do with my faith. And for me, it makes me feel bad at times because I feel like people are not trying to understand what I'm actually going through. They just want to say that I'm not being faithful to God or anything like that. So that's what I would look at religious trauma.
And it goes the same, just to piggyback off of what Latoya said, it goes the same with when you are sick or having a hard time and you're in church and they like, well, you in church, why are you going through this? So it's you get the same feeling. Just because I'm in church don't mean I'm not supposed to have struggles, because God said we in this life we will have trials and tribulations. He said, but I have overcome the world. So that's why you say you keep the faith, because he has overcome everything that we are going through. And so
Oh,
All right.
those was
Thank
good
you
points.
for sharing
Well,
your definitions or your idea, terminology, or how you define religious trauma. Um, so what the definition of religious trauma is this. Basically, it is any trauma that takes place in a religious setting, often through psychological or emotional distress or emotionally manipulative practices. Religion can play an essential role in a person's life, and many may find incredible fulfillment in exploring their religious beliefs. However, the main definition is again, it's a trauma that takes place in a religious setting, often through psychological or emotional stress or emotional manipulative practices. So some of you, y'all ladies have actually opened up the door for some of those experiences and which I have felt and which I have went through. And some of those things are, symptoms or a part of religious trauma. Um, so thank you for sharing. Religious trauma is not an easy task or an easy topic. I mean, a lot of us experienced that, but we just didn't know what it was or what we called that. Like Miss Latoya said, church hurt. Black people or the Black community is overly religious. In the sense that I think up to 80% of Black people are religious. So a lot of those people are Christian, happen to be Christians. So with that, you will probably hear those terminology. Oh, that person don't go to church because they have experienced church hurt. Well, it's not church hurt, it's religious trauma. There's a difference. And it's not the church that hurts people, it's the people that believes in certain doctrines and believe and use those against other people in manipulative ways and using scripture or any type of other religion that you use. So it's like religion trauma is not just here in the Christian faith. It's found around the world. You have Muslims who use religious or who has been impacted by religious trauma. You have some people who are non-religious or spiritual or who may be doing new age stuff do the same thing. You have Hindus and all the other religions do have that type of religious trauma, and people experience that type of trauma. So based off that definition, we know that a lot of this is actually emotional, psychological manipulation practices, and they use that to control people, and a lot of people, feel shame and guilt when it comes down to that. So thank you, ladies, for sharing what you think religious trauma is. So
So I have a question, Carter. So
yes,
would this be considered religious trauma? Because I've had this happen to me several times. I'm in Bible study. A lot of the people know that I'm HIV positive, been diagnosed since 93. And when I share my testimony about it, right, I get the mothers of the church. They get right upset. And baby, you ain't got to say that you HIV positive. You ain't got to tell it. You look good. You ain't got to tell it. And I feel some kind of way about that because it makes me feel like you're not accepting who I am. You want me to act as if because God has blessed me that I need to forget what he's done, or I got to pacify you for whatever reason because you feel like you know, I don't know if you feel like you've seen somebody talk, that you talk to me and you don't want nobody else to know that I'm HIV positive, so you don't want me to tell it. I don't know, but I feel some kind of way. Could that be religious trauma too?
yeah, yeah, because it's happened within a religious setting. Whenever it's within a religious setting or a community, and people are feeling that type of dread and despair and depression after some religious people or some mothers do that, anyone can do that. It doesn't have to be like a mother, anyone. It could be anyone inside the church, a church member who could say something like that because y'all share that same community together in a religion. So yeah, it happened in a religious setting, and it came from people who happen to be religious inside that community. And when we're talking about right now, we're going to focus more so about the Christian perspective, or the Christian religion, because in America, 2/3 of Americans are religious, but overwhelmingly of them are Christian or identify as some type of Christian, or align with some type of Christian denomination. But yeah, most definitely. So anyone else experienced that or have an experience around religious trauma? Because remember, anything that is emotional distress, psychological or emotional distress, is a form of religious trauma, which Esther had experienced with those people saying that she shouldn't share that testimony or that story. Because what you're telling me is I cannot share what I've been through because it makes you uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's happened to me, but mine was different because mine was with an abusive husband. And whenever I talked about that abuse, somebody told me, "Well, if you keep talking about it, you didn't forgive him." It wasn't a fact that I didn't forgive him. I was talking about it to help somebody else.
And you see
Absolutely.
how they project that onto you, Miss
Yeah,
Karen? How they project
Mhm.
that idea that how they
that's
project all that onto you, and you're like, well, no, that's not why I'm sharing this story. I'm sharing a story because I can help someone else. And now a lot of people try to use that, to tell people how to think, how to believe, how to act, and what your and I would have corrected that person. I'm like, no, that's not my intent. My intent is this, you know. So yeah, that is a form of it, and you was going through
but that was
abuse.
a preacher that told me that.
And there you go, religious trauma.
Yep,
It
that was
comes
a
Yep,
within that.
preacher.
that's it.
There you
That's
go.
it
When
right
everything
there.
like yeah, even authoritative, especially when
Mm-hmm.
they're authoritative or have some type of lead or leadership in a religion, then that, like a pastor, that is still a person. Actually, believe it or not, there's a difference between religious trauma and spiritual abuse. Spiritual abuse is like more than one. Religious
Mm-hmm.
trauma is somebody's furious feeling trauma within religion overall. But with spiritual abuse is someone like a pastor or one-on-one person telling you or trying to say, no, this is how it is. And they try to control you. So a pastor saying it to you, that is spiritual abuse. And I can go more into that later on in the discussion. Definitely when it comes down to spiritual abuse. So the other one is now, anyone else got to share? Because I'm pretty sure it's more to us. Because again, most of us are a part of a church or have been a part of a church or still is a part of a church or identify as Christian. Again, this is more general topic about religious trauma, but again, we're following a Christian path because a lot of us have that experience within the Christian church. So anyone else have or any other religious, if you wasn't a Christian, is open to whatever religion you identify as. But it's up to you. It's about y'all experience and how y'all, had an impact or impacted with religious trauma. So I'm opening this up. So anyone else who would like to share?
For me, just like Esther said, her experience when I first found out that I was HIV positive, and I decided that I wanted to tell my church, and I told a friend, and they were like, "No, why would you go and say this in front of everybody? You need to keep it to yourself." And I'm like, "No, if God is leading me to tell my story, then I need to tell it, because if I help one person, that means it's worth it." So I stood before my church and I told them what was going on when I put on this program, and I felt better. It's like I became a different person. I felt like I could live then. So that was my experience.
And yeah, and that religious trauma stems because again, when you're a person of faith, that is a part of your identity. That's a part of who you are and your beliefs and how you carry yourself throughout the world and show you who you are to the world in social settings and many other settings. So this is a key identity. And whenever there's someone who's supposed to represent or supposed to be the voice of God telling you these things, that is religious trauma. Or even if somebody like a normal member, still they're trying to tell you how your life is supposed to be when they say, well, because you did this, this is why you got this. It's not the cause and effect, in that sense. You can't sit there and say because you did something wrong in your life, therefore you've been punished. And of course, some people can use scripture to manipulate that because whenever you use scripture to manipulate a narrative and make somebody feel shame about something, that is religious trauma and spiritual abuse, So I'm a big fan of, if you like to live by the Bible, use it to reflect on yourself and your own actions and don't go out and bash other people in the head with it. Because when I was a Christian, one of the things I did know is Christ never told people to go out there and beat people over the head with the Bible and say they're going to hell. It was a story in there where Christ said, when you go to these towns and the people do not receive the message, leave the town by shaking the dirt off your
Dust
feet.
off your feet.
Yeah, your dust off your feet. Sorry. And he never say you're going
That's
to hell
right.
because you don't believe that. He said,
That's
what?
right.
Shake the dust off your feet and move on.
That's right.
But so with this Americanized Christianity, we're going to talk about, Christian nationalism in a few minutes, like later on the conversation. But we are having so much impact here in America and how one ideology or belief of Christian views is trying to overtake other people's beliefs. But yeah, that's one thing that I feel that a lot of people shouldn't do with the verses is take them out of context and use them against other people. I hear it every time people say, "Oh, you're supposed to read it within the context for which it was written." I'm like, good. Let's also think about the time it was written and by who read it. Those scriptures and verses. But I want to open up to another question. What causes religious trauma? Anyone can answer that.
You just said it. That's using scripture to convict another person of something that person felt like they did wrong, and that is the cause of it. You using scripture to point to my sin, but you ain't done nothing with your own sin, because when as I once tell people, I said, don't look at my sin. I said, because God ain't gonna ask you about my sin. He gonna ask you about yours. And so
And that's good. That's a good opening because what we can also say, and that is, get the plank out of your own eye first. Don't judge no one. Christ said that several times, and I was actually in a dialogue or debate or I say a discussion between some online religious people. So when I just used by verse what Christ said, they was offended. I'm like, you're offended because of what Christ said. What I'm saying, I'm just telling you or reminding you what you're supposed to do. You're not supposed to judge. Somebody did open up the idea of righteous judgment, but I was like, what about we all fall short of God's glory in that sense, according to Scripture. So you cannot even say righteous judgment because every day you fall short.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So
Right.
it's always about, sharing the love of Christ in that sense. And of course, some people are like, well, that's how you interpret the religion yourself. That's how you interpret it. And yes, that is a viewpoint that I do have that I stand by. However, whenever you look at some type of scriptures, I'm not using it to control others. I'll say, well, what does this mean to you? How are you living your life according to what Christ said? Love your neighbor. Don't judge individuals. Matter of fact, don't cast a stone if you're a sandwich, you can cast a stone in a sense. But yeah. So what causes religious trauma? Religious trauma occurs when religious officials or a religious community uses person's spiritual beliefs against them to impact a person's action, decision making, and well-being. So some ideas of this of causes of religious trauma includes using guilt and shame to control behavior. You know, they can be found in organizations in their strict moral codes and rules. You know, strict gender roles. Women do this, men do this.
Mm-hmm.
Fear-based teaching. Idea is like the idea of eternal punishment. Or some kind of spiritual damnation. Sorry. Excommunication and shunning. Repression of critical thinking. These are, some causes of religious trauma. And I can point on all of these. When it's an unhealthy religious community, they definitely have all of these different causes. Definitely when it's repression of critical thinking and thinking for yourself, independent thinking. Physical, emotional, sexual, or financial abuse. That is so tailor-made to religious trauma. Those are some causes. I feel that sometimes the Black church are guilty of this, of religious trauma. And a lot of people want to walk away or, sweep up under the rug. The Black community always say, what happens in this house stays in this house, right? So the same the same idea is in the Black church in a sense. Whatever happens in this house stays in this church, in that sense. So a lot of people have been physical, emotional, sexual, or financial abuse, right? So yeah. So these are some causes of religious trauma. Can any one of you identify or see any causes that I just went over personally in your life, or have you experienced any of those causes when it came to the causes of what causes religious trauma? I know it's a lot.
I really appreciate this conversation because like when I was growing up, right, one of the things that and I still have to work on today. You know, my mom was very spiritual, but they had me confused. Dad was Catholic, mom was AME Zion, Holiness, Baptist. She really didn't know what, but all of those religious denominations was centered around damnation, right? And one of the
Right.
things that they did when it came to sex, right, was they really tried to no, you're not supposed to touch, you're not supposed to kiss, you're not supposed to hug, you will get pregnant. God don't want you like that. So you don't want to burn in hell for touching somebody because you gonna get pregnant and you gonna burn in hell. And you know what? That thing has really impacted my life because it made me not want to find out who I was sexually. It didn't make me want to explore my sexuality. Because I always felt that if I tried that, I still hear that in my head. Oh, you gonna die. You know, you know that you don't do that. You don't be feeling up on each other. Why not? I mean, that's the least the protective way of not getting pregnant is to feel on each other. But it's, and the punishment was damnation. And they told me that I was being disobedient because I was always caught in the back of the church kissing a boy. I ain't let him do nothing else, but I would kiss him. I would want to kiss. Oh, they told my mama I was a demon.
Mm.
So, I grew up trying to, maintain this status quo of not letting nobody, don't be touched, don't, nothing about being a woman, a young girl. And it's sad because I still see that practice being done today. So some of those causes is, they using guilt and shame to control my behavior because they thought they caught me kissing that I was a promiscuous. And I wasn't. I just wanted to kiss. And all I did was kiss the boy in the mouth. But they told my mama I was a hoe, I was this, I was that. And I'm a young girl. So
I was
yeah.
gonna add that just to piggyback on what Queen Esther said, and also what Carter mentioned about what happens in this house stays in this house. Sometimes that flows over to the church. And so when there is abuse, sometimes the church will protect the abuser and dismiss the pain of the victim. Instead of calling the authorities and instead of calling the police, sometimes that pastor, that deacon, or whoever it may be within the church is protected. Meanwhile, most of the time, it's not just one victim, it's multiple victims. And so I consider that a form of religious trauma. Carter, I don't know if you can give me some feedback on that, but and also I just feel like we should never describe someone as a demon, especially a child. And children are curious, and it's natural to want to kiss a boy. It's natural to want to explore your sexuality, but that's just my thoughts on religious trauma and how religion is used to sometimes control and to cover up what's truly going on within the church family.
Yes, thank you for sharing, Tawanda. That is really important. And yes, there is a cause of religious trauma when it comes down to physical, emotional, and sexual, financial abuse. Whenever you have a person of a leader, a religious leader, who can sexually abuse children. And matter of fact, whenever we think about it, these are not narratives that we're living by. These are experiences that so many people have often shared in these times that they have been sexually abused or emotional or physical abused by their church leaders. And sadly, some of their parents allow this to happen. We have seen many stories where religious pastors or religious leaders do this and they get protected. And there's more often where the victim is being blamed for some of those of what was she wearing, or you shouldn't wear this inside of church. This is why you get men that way, or this. So these are forms of or causes of religious trauma for individuals who are experiencing that inside a religious institution. When you have a pastor who know what they're doing is wrong morally and they still do it or even try to justify that, then we have the uh, believe it or not, I'm just this going to be like a side topic. When you think about patriarchy, that women are secondary to men and women are supposed to be used as just baby makers and carriers and give birth. They're the ones that is their religion. That's what people use religious sentiments on, the idea of women just being there for the men use. And sadly, we are seeing this happen rampant inside churches. And when I say churches, I mean more so the Black church. And a lot of people are not talking about this. And when they do talk about this, they get at the victim and don't give them these resources that they need to assist themselves. So when that happens, the victim is then traumatized even deeper because they went to somebody who they claim to be safe, moral, and good. Right? So when we see pastors and preachers does this, again, there's news articles, there's facts about this. It's so much out here. And the issue is some people want to flip narratives. For example, here's one. Drag queens and drag shows are where people or children get this sexual abuse when it's not. It's in your homes, it's in your churches, more likely. Matter of fact, some of those drag queens may have been products of religious trauma because they may have been sexually abused in the church setting or a religious setting. So yes, physical, emotional, sexual abuse is a cause of religious trauma. And Esther said shunning or making somebody feel bad. You make somebody feel isolated or they're being disobedient, so you have to treat them a different way. And we know children are innocent. So yes, they're trying stuff because they probably see it in their environment. You know what I'm saying? And again, that goes to like even strict gender roles, especially harmful when it is used to justify discrimination, sharing, or power imbalances between different genders. That's like that form of, patriarchy. And Esther said it, of course, guilt and shame and control somebody's behavior. You're not going to do this, you can't do this, or you're a demon. Children, when we look at the psychologically or the brain development of adults, our reasoning factor does not fully develop until we're 25. So we're not thinking about, or reasoning or rationality on those parts in that sense. And it's fear-based because what you're saying is if you do this, God's going to punish you. And we continue to hell because you did a small little thing. Something so finite, something so small in that sense. But yeah. So yes, I validate that does happen in the church, and I wish churches would have more forums and conversations like this where they have people who talk about it instead of shunning people and making them feel bad, because none of that is their fault. Whenever a person sexual abuse anyone or use their sex as power over someone else, that needs to be called out. I'm not calling people in when it comes down to that.
It got to be
And
some
women,
kind of accountability or
yes,
responsibility for their actions.
That
yes, yes. And that's like, to me right now, you know, Trump, what he's doing, he feel like he's above the law. So religious people or leaders feel like they're above the law. And it's sad, there was this video of this woman who came up to the altar to expose the pastor of the church for sexually raping her when she was a kid. Her husband was there, so it was traumatic for her. And it was kind of hard for her to come out and say, guess what the church people did? Instead of surrounding her, loving her, or asking her, what can we do to help ease this, they went around the pastor and prayed for him and said, it's all right, pastor. It's all right. They just doing this because X, Y, and Z. God chose you. You know, whenever something like this happens, this is only from the devil. That is religious trauma because
Yes,
somebody
it
is
is.
at a vulnerable spot and telling you what this man did, but you offer prayer and said this man is not perfect.
And ain't
But
offer me no
meanwhile,
prayer, ain't offer
yes,
me no support, but you offer the person that did the abuse, you offer them. I mean, how isolating is that? And when we talk about HIV, how is that person supposed to feel supported that they go through this medical condition, and I'm supposed to believe that you're going to do everything you can to support me through it when you're doing stuff? I've seen stuff like that go on. I'm not going to share with them. I'm going to run from them. And it's supposed, spiritual and religious, through our history, is supposed to be a place where we get our greatest support. Supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's become a place where sometimes people are mostly traumatized in that setting.
Yes.
And we're causing so much. Now we got, abuse running rampant. Now we got people they don't want to take care of themselves. They don't want to find out about what's going on. And we creating this cycle, and we talk about we want to end the HIV epidemic. We want to reduce discrimination. Well, the first thing, we got to get everybody together to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we
Again,
got
those
to be
main.
accountable for our actions. It's nothing wrong when you know you made a mistake. Own up to it. And let's move on. Let's see what we can do to provide a more safe, supportive environment. Not kick people out in the street. That don't make no kind of sense.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, my camera's messing up, so I have to like.
Okay.
Oh no, technology. Um, but yeah, main causes of religious trauma is suppression. Critical thinking. Maybe you have a few doubts about scriptures, or there's some things you would like to talk more so about. Like for example, having a discussion on Facebook where pro-life or pro-choice, and of course they repeal Roe versus Wade. This is actually going to impact a lot of individuals because one thing Roe versus Wade did is make sure people have resources and access for their reproductive health. But now they're restricting that and they got rid of that. So now you might have more people getting pregnant through rape, sexual abuse, girls experiencing this. We actually had a story came out where it was a young girl, I think she was no more than 14, 15, who was raped by her rapist and got pregnant. But in the state that she lives in, she cannot have any type of abortion. But I say this because when you have the pro versus, pro life versus, pro-choice, it senses it's like it's a war because you still have religious camps, who's on both sides, and they was like, well, you can't do this because this says this, or the other side says from the same book, you can't do this because this says this, right? So, and what do you do in that sense? So I say all that because main causes of religious trauma is a strict moral code. Again, pro-life versus pro-choice, suppression of critical thinking. A lot of women who decides to go with the abortion, have thought about it and they think about it, and their churches tell them no, you have to, even if they've been raped. Like no, or inequality and power dynamics. That is a key player in that because when we think about power dynamics, who has more power often wins. The pastor versus a church member who happened to be a woman that they molested or raped. They will believe in the power dynamic, a man over a woman, or a straight person over a gay person, a white person over a black person. They can go on and on about inequalities and fear-based and punishment-based teachings. Like if you just step outside of these strict moral codes or do not follow what we believe, you're going to hell or God's going to punish you with something. So a lot of people, and it's a cause effect thing because, like you said, Esther, earlier in your conversation, when it came to people living with HIV, a few of y'all shared that we don't know why that person may have got HIV. It wasn't because of God did it, right? So what we could say is, how did that person end up doing that? Because one thing people don't know is some people, are heavily sexually active. I just found out people who has ADHD are hypersexual, not because they want to. It's just it's a symptom of them having ADHD. And if you're not treating your ADHD, then you are here having sex with multiple people, or being sexual, having multiple partners. And then some things, whenever someone have been sexually abused, they act out their sexual abuse by sleeping with other people to ignore that pain, and they probably have HIV through that. That doesn't mean it was punished by that, because Esther, you shared a story with us earlier, when I first met you, how a woman said what she said, and you said, well, did this baby deserve that punishment because their baby's born with HIV? That caused her to that trauma.